All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Tuesday, and you know what that means. It's time to see what we can discover from the wisdom of the Tao. And we're reading from Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, but we're not just reading. We're reading till something sparks our mind, and then we're elaborating and trying to discover a deeper meaning for ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm not just sitting here reading a book, if that's what you're thinking. Much more than that, and I actually do too much ranting sometimes, which is just fine. So today we are into the 66th verse of the Tao Te Ching and trying to discover its wisdom so that we may apply that wisdom into our lives and begin living the wisdom of the Tao and the wisdom of the ages and all the other things that we research here on this channel so that we can create a much higher quality of life, not only for ourselves, but for those around us, for those in the world around us. I hope you got yourself some tea, ladies and gentlemen. Tea, soothing pleasures are the best. Tea soothes the soul. But if it's nighttime where you are, then grab yourself a cold beverage, cold, whatever you like, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for joining me and being here. T says today, always gives us a little message here on these things. What belongs to you shall come to you. What belongs to you shall come to you. And that makes me think of patience and gratitude for where we are now and what we have, being grateful for all that you are and all that you have and all that continues to show up into your life. Now, it's up to us in our ability to choose our own perspective. And, that's a difficult task in its own and takes much practice. It takes much changing of our perspectives, changing the way we look at our world and being able to experience our world and our life in a new way through this new perspective. And so change your thoughts and change your life is what that is all about. Now, like I said, we're on the 66th verse of the Tao Te Ching, and Wayne Dyer titles his chapter, Living by Emulating the Sea. So Dr. Wayne Dyer, change your thoughts, change your life. I don't mention it often enough, but Dr. Wayne Dyer has been the biggest influence for me. I've had many influences, excuse me, over the years, but I think Wayne Dyer stands out as one of the most profound and powerful influences and, teachers, masters, mentors that I've had in my life. I think it's because the way that he produced his content, which was not only books like these, but lectures and great speeches and podcasts and many different forums, enough to where you can read it, you can listen to it, you can watch it, and people learn in different ways. And so, but Wayne has really made an impact on my life, and hopefully he will on yours. And if you've never seen any of his lectures, and if you've just heard me talk about, what he talks about here in these series that I've done, Wisdom of the Ages and Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. I think the series itself is called The Tao and the Wisdom of the Tao, but if you've never seen him or heard him actually, be sure to check that out because that is important to me. Now, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into the wisdom of the 66th verse of the Tao Te Ching and see what we can learn here from the wisdom of the Tao. Living by emulating the sea is what Dr. Wayne Dyer titles this section. The 66th verse of the Tao Te Ching begins by saying, "Why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Humility gives it its power. Therefore, those desiring a position above others must speak humbly. Those desiring to lead must follow. Thus it is that when a sage stands above the people, they do not feel the heaviness of his weight. And when he stands in front of the people, they do not feel hurt. The sage stays low, so the world never tries, no, the world never tires of exalting him. He remains a servant, so the world never tires of making him its king. Fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. It's another one of these paradoxical versions. This is one of the simpler verses of the Tao, actually, that I feel like we've gone through so far, having done 66. And so, why is the sea the king of 100 streams? See, there's many times in previous verses of the Tao that Lao-tzu mentions this this metaphor or this understanding of water and the ocean being very powerful, but yet it remains low and it remains humble, and it's this interesting idea of how all the streams and rivers flow back down to the source, another metaphor for the source. And so this is another addition to that philosophy of understanding, the spiritual, philosophical meaning of the ocean, or the spiritual philosophical representation of the sea and water. But it's saying here, why is the sea the king of 100 streams? It's like he's reminding us, because he said this before, because it lies below them, and it is humble, or humility gives it its power, which is the exact opposite of what we would think commonly in life. We would think commonly that those who rise above and stand out in the crowd are those who gain power or have recognition or whatever, version of that exists in our lives. And so, but it's saying here that the very opposite of what we commonly expect to be the way that it is actually true, which means when we stay humble, therefore, those speaking humbly, those desiring a position above others must speak humbly. So if we can stay low, stay in a position of humility, or there's a great sentence that's like, not seeking power over others. Enlightenment is not seeking to dominate others, whether it be spiritually, physically, or any of these things. And so there's this fascinating correlation between alignment, or aligning yourself with the Tao, with the force, living a Tao-centered way, and this ability to stay humble or stay in a state of humility. Because that is when actually we will gain the power, the true power that we have sometimes so long been striving for, depending, what you have been seeking after in your own journey. But it is that old understanding of the paradoxical nature that when you, strive for something, it eludes you, and when you no longer chase after it, it is right there for the taking. It's very confusing. But I'm sure that you have experienced this in your own life, because I have in mine, ladies and gentlemen. So those desiring to lead must follow. Thus it is that when a sage stands above the people, so this person who is able to live in this humble, low, non-boastful, aligned way, aligned with force, aligned with Tao, Tatum, with Great Spirit, with God, whatever that be for you. The universe, ladies and gentlemen, maybe, when we are aligned with harmony in nature, in the way, then we are a sage. And that's, the whole process. It's take many lifetimes to figure out what all this great wisdom means. First of all, even encounter it and know that it exists. And then second of all, to begin to try to understand it. Third, to practice it. And even fewer, this is like one of the things the Buddha said, very few will even come into contact with this, and then very few will even have an interest into searching into it. And even fewer so will continue that search and begin to discover the wisdom. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but even fewer so. This is why I say we are like the 1%ers, ladies and gentlemen, but maybe that's growing and we hope so. But, even fewer so will go as far as to continue the practice and come to understand and continue and not stop. But it is unique, and so we are unique, ladies and gentlemen. This is when the sage stands above the people and has this alignment, this way that is different than what is commonly expected out of the ego-centered way of behaving in reality that we most commonly see throughout our history, at least the last, the history that we have so far. How this, this boldness, this striving, this getting ahead, dominating over others and having power and control and status and things, and how all this has seemed to be an illusion of greatness, and how we get all of those things that are considered greatness in this reality. But there is a paradoxical way to all of these things, to where greatness can be found from simplicity, from humility, from staying low and not dominating others. But I'm rambling and tangenting here, ladies and gentlemen, so this may hit differently for each and every one of us. And this is the important point, is what I was saying at the beginning of the prophecies of Hermes in the Hermetica last week on Wednesday, is this idea of constant contemplation, ladies and gentlemen. So if this brings up different thoughts in your own mind, extrapolate upon those and see where it leads you. Now, the sage stays low, so the world never tires of exalting him. He remains a servant, so the world never tires of making him its king. Living by emulating the sea is what Wayne Dyer describes this 66th verse of the Tao Te Ching as in his extrapolation here. And let's jump right into what Wayne has to say. Living by emulating the sea, unlike the perception of God, Wayne says and begins, as an old white man who created a universe where your behavior may cause you to be sentenced to damnation for eternity. How many of us lived for some time or still do in that paradigm? And isn't it a sad thing? Doesn't this make you weep, Hermes says. But it's like, unlike this perception of God as we have had, fed to us throughout the years, just as a common understanding of the, Christian or Judeo-Christian workings of how God and the universe works in our lives in the afterlife, and all of the most important questions that kind of drive our purpose and our direction. And it drives a lot of our subconscious, I believe, motives and morals and all of these things in life. I'm not saying that morals are bad, ladies and gentlemen. We need good ones, but we don't need limiting beliefs that keep us from accessing the true power and who we truly are, our true role here. And so instead of this idea of the perception of God as this old white man who created a universe that we are separate from, instead of that, the Tao is perceived as a natural energy. And that is how I think of the Force. That is how I think of Atum. And that is how I think of Great Spirit and the Tao and God. So it's the new understanding, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we're doing. We're changing our thoughts and changing our lives, changing our perception and our awareness, and changing our experience and changing our world. So the source of life isn't seen as a deity monitoring earthlings like a king or dictator. I did not expect we would go this direction. But Wayne continues, since it doesn't dole out punishments or withhold rewards. So that's another thing when it comes to manifesting or alignment with this force or source or God. This new understanding of this natural energy. The source of life isn't this king or dictator that doles out punishments or withholds rewards. Lao-tzu taught that the Tao only asks you to live in harmony with nature. So it's our only challenge. And I mean, if you are really able to do that, I mean, how powerful and divine do you think that kind of person would be? Somebody living in harmony with nature. And we're not talking about just going out here and, homesteading or going and living in the wild, bushcrafting and all of these things. That's not what we're getting at. So if this idea of living in harmony with nature is making you think of, going out into the wild and Bear Grylls-ing it or trying to survive out there and we're getting at a different idea that has to do with natural law and a natural way of being, of acting, thinking, feeling, the spiritual, emotional, physical, mental, all of these aspects of our lives and how we use all of those not only for ourselves, but then how we, input into the world with our energy through the actions and the behaviors that we choose on how we interact with not only the environment, how we interact with our spiritual selves and physical other people in the world. And so this idea of getting in harmony with a natural way, our true nature, the Tao-centered way, which has been referenced in many verses before. See, this is why you have to get like the basic beginnings of the philosophies and the undertones. So when he says things like, the Tao only asks you that you live in harmony with nature, you know that it's not telling you, oh, we have to go, live off the land. And you see what I mean? There's a different connotation. There's a different meaning. There's a different context, ladies and gentlemen, to understanding this wisdom of the ages and wisdom of the Tao. And so talking about this force, this natural energy, this source of life, that isn't this, anthropomorphized being, which means something that we have created into human qualities and characteristics or into a being itself, but rather this thing that is an energy force, is a natural energy and a source of life, and it isn't punishing or rewarding. It is impartial. And I think, just my, ramblings now, that this force is impartial because it is a resonant energy source that includes with it frequencies, of course, like all things in reality do. And so these resonances, these frequencies, these vibrations that eventually go from waves to particles in physics, and how nothing becomes something through the principalities or polarities of electrics and magnetics and electromagnetics and all of these things, which are connected to this, believe it or not. That's the great thing about all of this, a secret or hidden or esoteric knowledge, wisdom of the ages and of life, of reality, is that it's all connected. And once you begin to resonate with a greater level of awareness and understanding of all of this stuff I'm rambling about, you can begin to experience your life in a whole new way. And that's really the simplest goal here is, how do we experience more peace, more joy, more happiness? Wayne Dyer said his master taught him that the meaning of enlightenment was being surrounded by and immersed in peace. So simply peace. If you can be at peace, which I don't think it is a natural way to be at peace 100% of the time, at least for this, physical journey that we're on right now. Being a spiritual being, having a human experience rather than the other way around. But so let's get back to what Wayne was talking about there. I think that ramble was good enough. And so for Lao-tzu, Wayne continues, nature's great symbol is water. And I'll add, this is also the same for the kahunas in the Hawaiian spiritual tradition, which is fascinating in itself, ladies and gentlemen. So for Lao-tzu, nature's great symbol was water. And he refers to it in many of the 81 passages of the Tao Te Ching, like we said and mentioned earlier. And so when you emulate that element, important to mention, ladies and gentlemen, that water is one of the elements representing magnetism. Fascinating. It's one of the core elements. Fire, electric, water, magnetic. Interesting. And then the air is the intermediate, I believe, and the earth is what you get from the action of each of those. But that can be described and explained in many different ways that would disagree or partially agree, or all of these different things. So that's, if you know anything about any of that, that is a different subject. But it's good stuff as well, because once again, it's all connected, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're saying, Chase, quit rambling, keep reading the book. All right, sorry, here we go. Thank you for joining me, and smash the like button. So when you emulate that element, the element of water, you'll begin to see, Wayne Dyer says, the judgment and exclusion have no place in the Tao. Be like the sea, advises Lao-tzu, and the world will never tire of exalting you. The essential message presented in this verse and in many others of the Tao Te Ching is that the ocean is king, and not king in the sense that we think of it, this ruler or this dictator that's, like it was describing the new understanding of God there. Unlike the perception of God as this old white man who created a universe, or any behavior may cause you to be sentenced. This is a different kind of king. This understanding of the element and this great symbol that water can be in this spiritual wisdom and philosophy. And so be like the sea, advises Lao-tzu. The essential message presented in this verse and many others of the Tao Te Ching is that the ocean is king of all because it knows to stay low. All streams must ultimately flow to the sea, and in the process, it becomes a servant to all. The teachings here are clear. Be humble. I mean, if you get nothing, then that's it. Just be humble, ladies and gentlemen, and you will unknowingly create some kind of spiritual alignment and connection with force and Tao and universe, whatever you want to call it. Spaciness, you can make up all kinds of interesting names to describe this life force, this natural energy that we can experience not only in quantum physics, but just in our own experience in our lives. And so we can perceive it. And all streams must ultimately flow to the sea. So I guess what I was saying there simply is, if you be humble, you will accidentally begin the science of lucky people. There are those people, and you've heard me say this before if you've been here, that seem to be in the right place at the right time, and things just kind of work out for them. But I believe there is a science to this ability. And that's what I'm describing here, the aligning with different principles. There's a bunch of them that make up this hierarchy of alignment with natural way and harmony with nature, which we described earlier, a few minutes ago anyways, that can give us this ability to experience a higher quality of life. Now, back to what Wayne is saying here. The ocean is king of all because it stays low. Ultimately, be humble. Never put yourself above others or see yourself as superior to anyone. And don't take that in a way that you're no good, because you have to remember that we are all a part of the same thing. So it's like saying any droplet of water, like we're looking at this river here in the back, in the mountain painting there, which is on my Etsy shop, I believe, just updated that. But a single drop or bubbling of the water is a part of the whole river, which is a part of the whole atmospheric system, which comes from the source, which is the ocean. And so there's this interesting correlation. That's another description of this, how we are connected to God and how you are not separate from it and it is not separate from you. But at the same time, that goes for everything else in existence. And so we are no greater than the ants or the flowers, and we are no greater than any other of our fellow pieces of God. The great saying that God, we are all God in his different distressing disguises. But this requires a different understanding of God rather than this perception of some being who's judging and is separate from us. So, never put yourself above others as you see yourself as superior or see yourself as superior to anyone, because we are all a part of the divinity itself. And so we are all equally grand in way. Now, it doesn't mean that down here in the physical experience, different ones of us have different paths and choose things that we would judge from our limited perspective mindsets here in the, in time and duality, that we would judge things as, that was no good and this is positive and all of these things. But once again, it's a oneness based on polarity. So it's a lot to understand. It's really deep. But so we're each divine. Some of us choose to miss the mark, which is where the translation of sin comes from. But that doesn't exist in the traditional sense, ladies and gentlemen, because we just seen that we all have it, this ability. And that's what I'm really obsessed with, is figuring out, discovering not only how to access and, harmonize with, align with, and begin to use some kind of ability that apparently exists, and you can see it in the lives of the most peaceful, harmonious, or even in the lives of successful people that would seem like they are not spiritual. There's many examples for this. So anyways, becoming a servant, not a dominator. The highest power is a yielding valley. Referencing once again, all streams must ultimately flow to the sea, and in the process, it becomes a servant to all. And it gives life and power back out to everything, which is another metaphor you could take from the water, the ocean. And so when even in the tiniest waterways, and even when these tiniest waterways are left alone, they uniquely carve out a path that leads them to the sea, Wayne Dyer continues. And he also says, in the great ocean never lords its greatness and its power over the rivers and streams. It doesn't rise above them and demand devotion from them, nor does it threaten them with punishment or extinction if they refuse to cooperate. The sea knows instinctively that the streams and rivers will naturally gravitate toward that which stays low, toward that which is the way, I would say. Because think of every river that tries to go uphill is going to eventually flow back down because of the natural way and the laws of nature. And so, right here, it's describing, I've heard this before from a different person, put differently. But it's like, you want to tell me that a true God, the God that you believe in, now he was getting down here on, Christianity, but that's some people, when you get real deep into the new, spiritual, not new, but the ancient spiritual, new ways of thinking, I guess, is what I was saying, as compared to what you were indoctrinated with when you grew up, if you were indoctrinated into the Christian system. But so he's speaking from that perspective, and he's saying, you want to tell me that a real God would lord over you its greatness and its power, and demand devotion and worship, and threaten, so it was using it in the opposite way here. It was saying the great ocean never lords its greatness and power over the rivers and streams, and so over its spiritual beings, over the people and, life. Would God do this? Would God rise above us and demand our devotion? Or would it not rise above us? Would it threaten us with punishment and extinction if we refuse to cooperate? Or would it know instinctively that the beings and life itself will naturally gravitate towards that which is the way and harmony and the force and Tao and the God, and God, the God force? That's another explanation. I don't know. I'm constantly coming up with new ways to try to describe it. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, this will be a refresher for those of you maybe that missed it or have forgotten that the very first verse of the Tao says, the very first line of the Tao that says, the Tao that can be told. So talking about this force, Wayne Dyer called it living the mystery. But that is, which is nameless. So that can be told, or the second stanza says, the Tao is both named and nameless, but the nameless is the origin of all things. And the name that can be named is not the eternal name. So whatever description of name we try to put on this force and this spaciness and this energy, this natural energy and life force, it is not really the true thing. Because when we put a name on it, it becomes what Lao-tzu described as the mother of the 10,000 things, which is all the things that we like to think of as separate here in our physical experience. Now, using this metaphor throughout the Tao Te Ching, this metaphor of the streams staying low and the sea knows instinctively that the streams and rivers will naturally gravitate and flow back towards it, giving it its power by staying humble. Using this metaphor throughout the Tao Te Ching, Lao-tzu reminds you that people also tend to be instinctively drawn to those with some sort of intrinsic majesty, you could call it, that emerges from this ability of humility and staying low. Now think about in your life, somebody who tries to dominate and control and get ahead of others, and strive. How often and how many people do you think gravitate naturally towards those people from this, from a nice feeling of what Wayne Dyer describes here as an intrinsic majesty? There seems to be something nice about this. It's usually not these people who are striving to get ahead and dominating and forcing and controlling others. And so paradoxically, they may think they've gotten what they're after, but usually they don't have what they really wanted. And this is what causes a lot of very successful people to struggle mentally and spiritually. And that's another thing that blew my mind, is when I really realized that a lot of these people that we call very successful in the world, whether they be the richest people or the biggest inventors or business owners, the Musks and, the whoever it be of the world, not mentioning names, because those are rabbit holes, ladies and gentlemen. This is philosophy. And so it's like these people, it blew my mind when I realized that a lot of them really struggle with peace and with joy and with simplicity in life. And you can easily imagine that. So using this metaphor, Lao-tzu is reminding us that people also tend to be instinctively drawn to those with this intrinsic majesty, I'll call it, quote unquote, ability, that emerges from this humility and staying low. And this position isn't uniquely held by the great master. Peter, a servant of the apostle, or servant and apostle of Jesus, offers an almost identical message in the New Testament, centuries after the death of Lao-tzu. Be shepherds, it says here. 1 Peter 5, chapter 5, verse 2 through 3 here. Be shepherds of God's flock. And remember, I'm into translations and things, so before I read this, I'll say that the translations probably mean a totally different thing here. Once again, there are rabbit holes, but there is also just philosophy. And so we're trying to get a spiritual philosophy out of this rather than, trying to be so serious and judgmental about translations, which is very important in its own time to discover deeper, truer meanings from keeping yourself by being led to missing the mark and the translation of that. And so, anyways, with that being said, there's this little offering here that Wayne Dyer gives to us. That's talking about this idea. That's also an identical message in the New Testament. It says here, be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, serving as overseers, not because you must, but because you are willing. And God wants you to be. Not greedy for money, but eager to serve. And when I'm reading that, I'm thinking of this natural God, this force, this harmony, and I'm thinking of serving other human beings and serving nature and life. Because you got to be careful with this, the biblical teachings. They want to get you to believe that it was talking about being a servant, which translates to slave, to this entity that you are separate from. And if you see that, you're immediately like, wait a minute, that's not the spiritual philosophy that I was getting the other half of the time. So there's got to be two stories, ladies and gentlemen. Side note, my beard's always curving a different direction. It's kind of funny. We're going to have to trim it down soon, ladies and gentlemen. But, so you must be eager to serve, not lording it over, those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And so, once again, eager to serve, not lording yourself over those entrusted to you. Which right there is like, okay, so if you're slave or serving something that is lording itself over you, that are entrusted to, see how there's these paradox that once you even ask one question, there becomes a million questions. And those who are dogmatically stuck in just that, the dogma, will not have what was described in their very own text as the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And I'll add, the wisdom and the open-mindedness to understand. And change the way, Wayne says, you think about yourself and others as model leaders by looking to the massive life-giving sea, who's patient, accepting, and lower than the streams that flow to it. Then imitate that water and the power yourself by suspending your ego and releasing the need to lord anything over anyone, ladies and gentlemen. The people you're entrusted to lead, so the people that are trusting you to lead will gravitate towards you in the water course way of the Tao's natural flow. And see, to me, this has nothing really to do with leadership. To me, this is more of an explanation of, once again, the nature of harmony with the force and God. The nature, I don't know. See, I never know what I'm going to title these videos. I'm like, dang it. But so, people you've entrusted will lead. Okay, so you're advised to learn from the way water behaves. Imitate it as much as possible in your life. And here are ways to apply the wisdom of emulating the sea in your life today. This is why you want to get this book for your shelf, for yourself, to put it on your bookshelf, which I'm still working on building another one so I can move my DVD/Blu-ray shelf here over. I can get a bookshelf behind me so that makes sense in these videos. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, there is practical advice at the end of each one of these really heady philosophical spiritual sections. And so you can use these little reference bits on how to apply this wisdom into your life, which is why you want to expand the description below the video. You gotta hit more, and expand it, and hit more again. I mean, they made it so hard for people. You would think it would be right there and you wouldn't have to press anything. But anyways, the link is down below. So number one on how we are advised to learn this way that water can be a metaphor to spiritual, living and harmonization with the way. Never assume that you know what's best. And this is difficult for many of us. Even if you're older, wiser, and richer than others, and have more influence and power than they do, or you think you're smarter and have researched more spiritual philosophy. So, spiritual ego is a big thing, ladies and gentlemen, that those of us researching these kind of things got to think about. Even though we've learned a lot more about philosophy and spirituality and the wisdom of the ages and the wisdom of the Tao and the lost wisdom of the pharaohs and all of these things, creating an enlightenment, a greater awareness of reality, that goes back to the lesson of this verse is we must stay humble. And those things do not make us greater than any other person or any other thing. And so it's, you got to be careful because you can do it in many ways with the ego in the world, but even your spiritual ego can come to lead you astray in this philosophy of humility and the teaching of the sea or the ocean, living like the ocean. Never assume that you know what best. So even if you're older, wiser, and more spiritually knowledgeable, you never assume that you are better than anyone and have power over them. Instead, imagine yourself as the great ocean that allows and encourages the smaller streams to come to you. Stay low, speak softly, and remain humble, and let others be in control of their lives as much as is humanly possible. Glad he added that bit there. By seeing yourself as the all-receiving sea, you must remove your ego from the picture and thus become like one of the leaders referred to in this verse of the Tao Te Ching. No one should feel themselves, no one should feel the heaviness of your directions or be hurt by your instructions. A situation that allowed me to implement this advice, Wayne says, occurred on the day I wrote this essay. He says, I live on Maui, and my 90-year-old mother is in Florida, and where my daughter Sage also resides. My mother was experiencing a stomach ache and nausea from some strong medication she'd taken. So I phoned my daughter to see if she had any suggestions for getting some. What? He phoned his daughter to see if she had any suggestions for getting some yogurt to her. Sage's immediate response was, we have some yogurt right here. I'll take it over to Grandma's. Rather than giving her an order and instructing her to tend to Grandmother, he says, I allowed my daughter to be of service while I stayed in the lowest place possible. An interesting metaphor, but there are many ways we could also take this. Second bit on how we can apply this wisdom into our life today is remain a servant. And that doesn't mean a slave, ladies and gentlemen. It's interesting that I said this on the single interview I did with Jeff long time ago, years ago now. But this idea of service to others and how it doesn't mean that you're a servant or a slave. There is a way that people can serve and provide service that is of mutual benefit for both parties. And there is no of this, slavery involved. See yourself as someone who is on this planet to assist others. Look at opportunities to be of aid, and particularly to those who need your leadership. Remember that the Great Sea serves everyone by being a life-supporting receiver of all who wish to partake of her bounty. So practice emulating her expressing the Tao. And practice emulating her by expressing and living in harmony with the Tao. And so he says and gives to us at the end of each of these, do the Tao now, ladies and gentlemen. Dictate a day, leading by serving. Dedicate a day to leading by serving, as opposing to giving orders, finding occasions to stifle your learned habit of interfering and telling others what to do and allow them to flow to you instead. Commit to this principle further by encouraging someone to make the decision for themselves rather than following your orders. Interesting finish there, ladies and gentlemen, but that is a boom to wisdom, a boom to the wisdom of the Tao and changing your thoughts and changing your life from Dr. Wayne W. Dyer. Ladies and gentlemen, fantastic. That was fantastic. And I still don't know what I'm going to call it. It's like alignment with God. How to align with God through the understanding of water? I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that while this video uploads. It is 2 p.m. now here where I am, ladies and gentlemen, the 7th of March, 2023. I hope everybody's doing fantastic, and I hope everybody got something out of that incredible wisdom of the 66th verse of the Tao Te Ching and my ramblings and Wayne Dyer's extrapolations and the wisdom of Lao-tzu. Next week's verse, ladies and gentlemen, the 67th, will be living by the 3 treasures. Living by the 3 treasures. What will that be about, ladies and gentlemen? Because mercy is the name here of the first. Interesting. And that is a boom to wisdom and a boom to knowledge. That was fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope you really got something out of that, description of harmony in nature and God and this understanding of the force and the Tao and the metaphor of the ocean and the explanation of God. Maybe that's the title, but let's write it down here real quick. The metaphor, PHOR, of the ocean and description of God. All right. See, I use God in the title instead of force and things because, if you put the description of the force, I don't know, actually, it could be debatable, but I think there's less people that are likely to want to watch something that is a description of the force, because that would be like a Star Wars fan or something, maybe. But you know what I mean? Like if you put God, more people that are seeking spiritual wisdom and whatnot will hopefully come across these videos. So you can play a part in helping more people that are like-minded or that may need the wisdom of the Tao and the wisdom of the ages and the lost wisdom of the pharaohs even. I mean, that's probably for a select less group of people, but share this with like-minded people, ladies and gentlemen. And be sure to like the video because that helps the algorithms push it up. Leave me a comment. I love to hear from you and I love to get back to you. Shoot, I forget who it was. It was something radio, but he's left like 20 comments, it seems like, in the last week. And wow, man, that guy has an ability to ramble. So if you're listening, thank you very much for your input and your added value to this discovery process that we're all on and this journey of enlightenment. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness and a greater understanding of the reality we find ourselves in. Seek to discover the hidden wisdom of the ages and the mysteries of our history. And remember that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way, ladies and gentlemen. So if we can begin to bring happiness to life by practicing and working on that, then the things that we've been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when I get there, but I'm just striving and struggling now. Those things become irrelevant, and we stop that struggling and striving because we are already there. And then the entire journey is wonderful, hopefully. So once again, thank you so much. I love and appreciate all of you for being here, for joining me in the premiere, which will probably be in an hour or so from now. And I love and appreciate all of you. It means so much to me that you would spend time here with me and Dr. Wayne Dyer and Lao-tzu and all the other wonderful teachers and guides that we have. And so tomorrow we will be doing another section of the Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs and the Hermetica, going into section number 2, the initiation of Hermes and the mystical vision of creation. So isn't it funny that we describe the nature of God here today in this metaphor of the sea and how to be humble? Might add to the title. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to expand the description. Check out my Etsy shop. I believe that painting there, 16 by 20, is available for purchase. And I need to update more, add more, but I'm not out here to try to sell paintings. I'm trying to, add some kind of enlightenment to the world so that hopefully we can see some change going on, ladies and gentlemen. And just a little bit percentage here and there will hopefully get us to that phase transition or the 100th monkey. But that's a funny one to look up in its own, that story. But I also have this book linked below in the description so you can get it for yourself to put it on your shelf. And a link to C60 Purple Power, the most powerful antioxidant known to man. If you haven't tried it, try it out, ladies and gentlemen. Give yourself the gift of health. All right. Thank you. Love and appreciate all of you, and I will see you next time.